Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage your questions panel, Neil O'Sullivan, Ross Borkett, Paul Anastasi, and Beth Foley, and plus your panel chair, Tim Boothman.
Right, thank you everyone. So, we've come to our first of our two question time panels. If the debate and questions is anything like the last session, well, you know, I applaud people's enthusiasm, passion. Many thanks for all those members who submitted questions, some very, very good ones, to be honest. Sadly, we probably won't be able to get through all I would like to, but we'll not get through. I've chosen some questions to kick off with, purely and simply because they encapsulate probably most of the questions that were put forward. So if you can, what will happen is we'll kick off with 3 or 4 questions. Those people know who they are. And then it'll go to a roving mic situation. So let's have a good question time panel and a good debate on various topics. So I'll start off by introducing the panel members. We've got Ross Borkett, I'm struggling to say it now, who's Director of Banking for Post Office Limited. We've got Neil O'Sullivan, Director of Parcels and Mails for Post Office Limited. We've got Paul Anastasi, is that correct? Which is Chief Technology Officer for Post Office Limited. And then we've got Beth Foley from Citizen Advice, Policy Advisor. So please be respectful. Please, you know, if you must put a bit of context into your question, that's fine, but just keep it to an absolute minimum and just get straight to the question. So let's have a good debate. Thank you, and let's not trip over the table. We're going to kick off with Sue Edgar. Thank you.
Sue Edgar, North East Region. Welcome to conference. It's good to see you all here, and welcome to all our delegates. What I would like to know is, this year we missed our segregation target by a minimum. Those supported by the NFSP with our segregation officers passed the target. Those supported by Post Office failed. And because they failed, they've dragged us all down on the large letter, normal letter rate. And that's not right. So we feel, as postmasters, that we deserve that payment. We've given you the proof, and Post Office have listened. We've given you the stats, which you like. We've given you that to consider giving us the payment. It's in consideration at the minute. But have you thought about doing it so that those that are segregating and pass that service, those that don't segregate or don't bother, still get the payment, which is not right? So should we not be judged, each office, on their own merits? Those that pass get the payment. Those that fail or don't take part don't get nothing. We, as postmasters, are all working for Royal Mail, who have set their precedent. Nobody can verify when they say, you failed. There's nobody watching Post Office, Royal Mail, sorry. They are marking their own homework. And it always seems to be that we've just failed by just this bit, just that bit, same as last year. We want to know, are you going to, going forward, are you going to pay us the money that you should pay us rather than give it to Royal Mail, who are marking their own homework? Or are you going to give it to Royal Mail, are you going to give it to us, which is who you should be giving it to? Going forward, will you judge each branch on its own merits? So those that pass get the money, and those that fail or don't take part get nothing, because that's what should happen. This is a proper world, and we are working our socks off, shall we say, to segregate and do at Royal Mail's whim. We can't be left like that hanging. It's not fair.
Right, thank you, Sue. I think the initial crux of the question is why should the whole network be penalised? you know, for missing, very slightly missing under, you know, dubious circumstances, why should the whole network be penalised? To Neil.
Thank you. Thank you, Sue. As you say, first of all, I'd repeat it under consideration, so I don't think that has been a decision taken yet. The principles, again, I think were for, as you say, for everybody to succeed, therefore for everybody to get paid. And I think you also comment on Royal Mail marking their own homework. So I think those are all fair challenges, frankly, and I think that we are and have to review how that segregation works. We've had a lot of feedback about some people think segregation isn't really worth the effort anyway, others think it is. So I think there is a piece of work that needs to be done very quickly to decide what segregation should be going forward. I personally will take it up with the Royal Mail team, who we're meeting with much more frequently at a senior level to try and deliver some of this reset that we're trying to achieve with the whole Royal Mail relationship. But I hear your comment. I think it's by the way, we got closer than ever before, I believe, for the first time this year. So this was the best performance. So I appreciate and recognize that across the business, a lot of work went into performing the task as required. I think there's it's under consideration, and I don't have the full answer for you on all of that. I exactly get the points, and I think I need to say that we'll have to come back to you on it, Sue.
Right, thank you, Neil. I think there's more debate to be had on that, and we'll keep us fingers crossed, and we'll see how things pan out on that one. So next question is Paul McBain.
Thank you. My question is, with Banking Framework 4 being accepted now January 2026, and we've heard a lot about it, but never really heard much about what's inside, is there any new work coming with us? An example would be credit cards, money statements, savings scoops, and cash withdrawals in both areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yep. Okay. So you're absolutely right. We've concluded our negotiations now around Framework 4, and obviously you'll have seen all the activity we had a few weeks ago to announce that. That has been about 2 years worth of work with the banks. It's not been an easy ride to get to where we are now. That deal was absolutely focused on maximising our opportunity in cash. And so we were really clear we wanted a much longer term arrangement. You will need more certainty running your business that these services are going to continue, and that's why we've secured a 5-year deal from January. We also needed to make sure we were paying you far more for doing those transactions. I think you've consistently said to me, as I've sat on the stage before, we are not paying you enough to do these transactions, and there'll be further announcements in a few weeks' time that Nigel and Neil will take you through, but we have secured much more money from the banks that will go to you around these transactions. The third thing was we haven't provided you the tools to do the job. We have not provided you with counters. We're now doing 3.5, nearly 4 billion every month over our counters. You should have the devices to do that. And so a really big part of this is investment from the banks to provide you those tools. And so some of you will have seen last year, we got about 3,000 note counters rolled out. We've got about 100 telecash recyclers. There are another 6,000 on ships on their way here that will go out. Our aim is to have some form of automation in every physical branch we have. Now, I know some branches might need more than that, and we'll look at that over this next year, but as a baseline, you should have some of those tools to do that. And that was what the deal was focused on, is making sure we've got long-term certainty around what we're doing in cash, we're providing you the tools to do it properly, and we are paying you more to do so. What it then allows us to do is to have much longer-term conversations with the banks. Now, that's already started. Nigel's been in and seen the chairs of the 5 biggest banks in the country in the last 3 months. They're all much more receptive now that we're talking about a much longer term horizon. How can we bring some of those banking services that are happening in the few remaining bank branches into our into what we're doing? How can we do things like credit card bill payments? You know, it's an area which I talk to banks on a regular basis. It gives us opportunities to do more of that. Framework 4 was about maximising cash. Now, there's still more to do. We've got conversations with Revolut this week. We're trying to get them to come on board. We know we've got, more we could do with some of the banks. Monzo came on last year. That has been a huge success. Monzo is now our 6th biggest bank by volume. And they're just doing deposits with us at the moment. They're about to raise their personal limits, so you will see more and more of that business come through. So there's more to do, but it gives us a platform now for those much longer term conversations about how can we do much more for the banks beyond cash. How can we be your presence in a community? So I haven't got the answers for you yet. This deal was about baselining cash, paying you, getting the investment to do what we're doing better, but it gives us the platform now to go on and do much, much more in the coming years.
Thank you, Ross. Next question, Tim Allen.
Hi, Tim Allen, Kington. It's a very rural part of the country on the English-Welsh border. This is for Beth, please. With citizens' advice experience of the country and all of the citizens in the country, to what extent does it provide communities with big problems when government forces people to go exclusively digital?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's something that we at Citizens Advice have looked at really closely. So we are the statutory consumer advocate for postal consumers. So that means we use evidence that we gather as a kind of research organisation, and we also look at the people who come to Citizens Advice day to day in our 300 local offices across the country. We're using that evidence to talk to government, to talk to Post Office itself, and to talk to other sort of elements of the industry to think about how to improve that experience for consumers and to ensure that postal services are meeting consumer needs. In terms of the digital transition, this is an area that we've done a lot of work in terms of we feel it's the biggest sort of potential for Post Office and sort of a key aspect of their social role at the moment. So what we're seeing is a real kind of hollowing out of high streets, as you'll be familiar with, sort of huge drops in bank branches, and actually a lot of cuts to third sector organisations, charities, organisations that would have supported the most vulnerable consumers to access support, government services at the points they need them most. We think that Post Office, actually, with the fact that it's got this sort of access criteria, that it has to exist across local communities, is one of the few organisations now that can act as that one-stop, face-to-face support hub to help people who really struggle navigating this digital transition. And we've been talking quite significantly with sort of Post Office and others about how to ensure that those services continue in future and how that looks under the government's green paper in terms of the future of the Post Office. There's certain areas where we've talked to consumers and they have sort of certain concerns. So quality of service comes up quite a lot, particularly if that kind of face-to-face banking service expands. So there are some concerns about ensuring that Post Office has the right expertise in the place of a bank branch to help people and small businesses to access those services, particularly if they have slightly more complicated needs or need further support. We've also done a lot of work around ensuring that people who can't access services digitally and need to rely on that analogue service can access post. So there is a big chunk of people who are actually excluded from post altogether, largely because they might be experiencing housing insecurity or victims of domestic abuse, all kinds of sort of issues that might mean someone can't access physical letter services. So we've done a lot of work and are working at the moment with Post Office around whether there's something that Post Office can do around post exclusion. So that ensures that people who have no access to digital services can continue to interact with government services and others through Post Office branches. So yes, we see the kind of face-to-face support hub as being the key to that digital transition, and Post Office seems to be an obvious location for that. Also, it has huge trust amongst consumers. So when we talk to people, we survey people at least once a year, There's still really high support, despite the context of recent years, for the post office, really strong support for maintaining government subsidy. We've not really seen that proportion. I think it's 8 in 10 of the people we surveyed strongly supportive of government continuing to subsidise post offices and the value of those local services, and that hasn't dropped in the last 7 years. So there's an awful lot of trust as well in the kind of post office as an institution, which is something that we think is sort of ensures that people in those circumstances do go to their local post office for that kind of help.
Right, thank you, Beth. I think the subject is an interesting one, and I think we'll probably debate this a little bit further. It sounds ironic, you know, for those people who are, shall we say, digitally excluded. Is there anything that you could do technology-wise, Paul, that you know, could aid and assist what the points that Beth has just raised?
Yeah, I think there's a huge amount that we can do actually, but I think we've, and it's probably been outlined over the last couple of days, I suspect, is we've got to get the foundations of the technology services right. We are not in the best place at the moment, but as we look forward and we start building out the foundation, then there are many things that we can add in terms of personal services, digital services, apps, and etc., that I think will really develop and evolve the services that we can give to customers through post office branches. I think that's an incredibly important part of what we do going forward.
Right, thank you, Paul. I'll come over to Ross and Neil. When the post office, for instance, with its clients are developing products and services, just how much connisance is given to, you know, those members of society that would struggle with, you know, the ever fast-moving changes that's coming in society. So we'll start with Neil.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously always at the forefront of our mind and in our consideration. And I think if we look historically at the product development or the expansion of services with Royal Mail, then that's clearly been exemplified in the services that we launch. With our other multi-carrier partners, then just if you look at the amount of coverage that they provide across the country, then it would be more challenging for us. But I think certainly as we look at any of the products, whether it be parcels online, for example, then we would go through all of the rigors and the process that are involved to make sure that it's suitable and accessible and meets the standards that we would expect and our customers would expect.
Right, thank you, Neil, and on to Ross.
It's certainly an area for banking we put a lot of focus on. I mean, and many of our cash users are customers who are not comfortable going online. There's quite a big overlap between those who are financially excluded and digitally excluded, and I think increasingly we are serving many of those people who are just not comfortable doing some of those. Doesn't mean they can't go online, but they may not be feeling confident about going and doing some of their finances online. So you know, a number of there is in cash and banking. Certainly when we talk to the banks, we are talking about how we are supporting those customers who they may not be interacting with through their other online type channels. So it is a big part of the conversation. It's also a really big focus of government. So last year the government set up a financial inclusion forum that is very focused on trying to support people in building that confidence, building access to do that. I think we have a role that we can play in that going forward. And it's something, you know, we're keen to look at how can we build on the fact that many people have a lot of local trust with their local post office and actually might come for help and advice. Well, where can we do some of that up to a point? And there's rules around advice and that we have to be very careful around. But I think there's an opportunity there in this next year or two to explore how we could do more to support some of those people and ideally get the banks to pay us to do so.
Right. Yeah, go on, Neil.
Build on that a little bit. I mean, I think if I reflect on some of the conversations I have with some of the carriers that want to work with Post Office, with you, they absolutely are focused on the fact that Post Office has that connection in the community and that reach and see the value. And I'm reminded of of a conversation with Amazon, who see very much the value of the way post office does have that reach and spread throughout the country and into the community. And if we look at Amazon, they probably have the biggest spread of services in our branches than any of our other partners. So I think the carriers do place also high value on it.
Just to come back here a little bit, you know, we are probably the only network that is primarily, you know, in-person, customer-facing. There's a lot. I think there's a lot to be done out there. We'll have all had customers come in the post office and said, my parcel's gone missing. And actually, none of us can do anything more than what's out there publicly online for a customer. So is there anything that could be done so that, you know, we have, shall we say, more in-depth tracking, you know, to really offer something to those customers when something has obviously gone wrong? Is there anything more, Neil, that could be done?
Well, I mean, I think we're selling in branch a partner's services with all of its features and its benefits or its deficiencies, if there are any. And if you look, I think, at the competitive nature of the parcels market, then you have DPD and Every and Royal Mail and others fighting very hard for customers. And the way they do that is by appealing to what's important to those customers, consistency in delivery. We heard a lot about that this morning, but nevertheless, that's where they are all competing. Information, data on delivery through apps, tracking where your delivery driver is, and so on. All, if you go back 10 years and we see as consumers how much that's changed, you can see that it's really delivery, visibility of information around a customer's parcel is critical to these couriers companies. Any customer that's had a bad experience is obviously very loud, very vocal, and rightly so. But we've also got to understand that it's the sweet spot for these companies to be able to really compete on excellence, and they do. And of course, you know, delivering tens of millions of parcels a year, they're going to get it wrong occasionally, and how they react to that and how we are able to react to that, I think, is part of the question. And I think we just need to make sure that our ability to raise customers' concerns with our carriers, whether it's Royal Mail, Every, DPD, and Amazon, is improved. I think I took that lesson away from this morning's session.
Yes. Yeah, I think we'll just finish with Beth. Just how much from people that you see to the members of the public at Citizens Advice, just how much of a frustration is it for consumers when they've bought a service or bought a product, something's gone wrong, and they seem to get nowhere. They get bounced from pillar to post, from call centre to go online, chatbot, that type of thing. Just how much of a frustration, do you see in Citizens Advice?
Well, in the parcels market specifically, it's a big problem. I mean, the letters is sort of a separation. There's all kinds of issues on the sort of Royal Mail side as well. But given we're talking parcels, I think we last surveyed consumers about this in October, November last year, and around 1 in 3 people had some sort of problem with their previous parcel delivery. And I think some of it is challenges in the structure of the market. So although we say it's a very competitive market, actually, consumers themselves often feel they don't have a choice of carrier. If you buy something online, the retailer chooses the carrier and you are sort of stuck with that. So they're a bit worried about some of the feedback mechanisms that go to the parcel carrier. It's also actually very difficult to raise a complaint, and this is something that the regulator has actually picked up on. So Ofcom have put in place new guidance around complaint services, but we're not really seeing that feeding through. So I think that sense of a feedback loop between the consumer and the parcel carrier is not always working as effectively as it could or should do, and perhaps it works in other markets. So that's something that people are very frustrated about. There's also a bit of confusion, I think, and we're working quite hard on the advice side to make sure people understand their kind of rights and protections around parcel delivery. So particularly if you nominate a safe place, there's a lot of questions around who's responsible if that then goes missing, and lots of people are not necessarily aware that if they do suggest a safe place and something goes wrong, they can then be liable, so there are risks to that. So we're working a little bit on the advice side as well to make sure people understand sort of what the arrangements are, and then we've done a lot of work on accessibility as well. So some of the biggest challenges in this market are for disabled consumers who often have particular requirements about how they need something delivered. And in terms of navigating it, making sure that they can get that information to the parcel carrier and that they have an understanding of how to sort things out if things go wrong has been the thrust of a lot of our work. We've also seen new guidance in that area and a little bit more encouraging signs in terms of people saying they now feel a little more confident in sharing that information with the carrier. But there are still all kinds of issues in the parcels market, and it's probably relatively unregulated given the volume and the sort of centrality to a lot of retail industry that it now plays over the last decade or two. So yeah, it's certainly an area that we've done quite a lot of work with consumers and talked to sort of Post Office about as well.
Thank you, Beth. So a lot of work to do, I think, Neil. She's not mentioned banking. Do you get any feedback on banking services at Post Office?
On banking, I mean, it's certainly going up. We're actually seeing record numbers of people saying that they are. I mean, that would be sort of fairly expected given the sort of collapse in high street banking we've seen in the last few years. So huge numbers of people now saying they are banking with the Post Office. I think it's still around 1 in 4 consumers who want to bank face-to-face and are quite reliant on doing so. In terms of the challenges there, it's generally, sometimes it's around access, so that sense that the access criteria doesn't necessarily capture what consumers can access. So a lot of consumers, particularly in rural areas, saying, I've now got a sort of part-time outreach and the numbers of hours are extremely limited. I'm struggling to fit that around work or other responsibilities, long queues and sort of demand for those services. And then some questions around the kind of quality of advice, and that's come up quite a lot with the sort of closure of a lot of directly managed branches. So there's a sense that there are some concerns consumers have about the quality of advice if they're going into a sort of a smaller franchised outreach model, and whether they will get the same kind of standard of advice, particularly if it's slightly more complex banking issues that they would have got previously.
Right, thank you. Thank you all for those concise answers. We'll move on to the next question, and it's a little bit of an old chestnut. It's been sent in by Nick Thornton from Pullen Market Post Office, but it's going to be asked by Christine Donnelly. Thank you.
Right, it's 3 parts, so don't relax straight away. To what extent are Post Office or Fujitsu currently making changes to Horizon without informing postmasters? What mechanism, if any, is in place to ensure transparency? And will postmasters be involved in developing Horizon and its replacement?
Right, thank you, Christine. I think it's fairly obvious who that question's for, so over to Paul.
Thanks very much, and thanks for the question. It's an important one. So let's cover the first bit to start with. To what extent are we changing? Like any software platform, for which Horizon is, it also sits on physical hardware that has challenges as well. These things go end of life, so there is a regular program of change that happens with the platform. Largely, it's to safeguard software so that we don't breach compliance or something doesn't become vulnerable, so we're subject to potential issues around cyber attacks or things being operating in a way that's not expected. So that does happen, but that is done in conjunction with the teams in Post Office. So it doesn't get done by Fujitsu without any of our guidance or oversight. It falls within our change program, and we get to see all of that. Nothing is done at all without our knowledge anymore. I can't speak entirely for the past, but I imagine that was probably quite different back then. So we do have quite rigid control on this, and within our PMO, if you wanted to see what changes were taking place, absolutely you could ask and we would tell you, but they are relatively minor and mostly of an upgrade nature. There are some programs of work that do mean that we change things in the platform just to be able to provide new services, new offerings that are things that postmasters have directly asked for, and they feed in via our commercial teams into the programs, and we do that. Going forward, however, we will be limiting the amount of change that will take place in the Horizon platform, and essentially that falls into a couple of parts. We don't want to develop new features in the Horizon platform because Horizon has a shelf life and arguably it's way past that date, but we do have to keep it alive. And we'll be nurturing it for the next few years. And the new activities that we would do under strict consideration, whether they brought value to the business, to postmasters or not. There's no point in investing time and money building something that effectively generates technical debt that we have to redo later. So, and then moving on to what are we doing in terms of, I guess, new platforms and so on. So absolutely, the commercial teams and postmasters will be part of that journey. It's really important for us that what we provide is fit for purpose. There's also an element of work where the outputs that are needed by postmasters need to be consistent and in some cases the same as you have now. And we need to make sure that we do that in a more standardized way that than we do right now. What people probably don't realize is that the complexity that we see with the Horizon platform is because it is so customized in the way that it was built. And it was built with an architecture that you just would not see today. So we're trying to get to a point where we've got some standard operating processes and the platform itself is stable. Excuse me. Sorry about that. So as we move into new platforms, we will absolutely engage with our postmasters to look at the types of things that you want and the types of things that are absolutely needed and critically remain compliant, so that we have open audit trails and it's completely visible and transparent. That's really the goal. A lot of that is focusing on standardization, for which Horizon and platforms of its nature just simply weren't. Horizon will be a thing of the past though, and it's really key that we say that it will go. So there isn't a world going forward where Horizon remains with us. It will be an entirely new modern platform over the coming years, and that's really key for us because we need to build a foundation and a set of products that will take you into, you know, the future and strategically deliver the benefits that your businesses need going forward, and that simply can't be done with what we have now. So it's really important that you're with us as we do it. Did I get all the, I think that was everything.
Yep. Thank you. Just as a matter of interest, Beth, do you ever get anybody sort of, you know, having concerns about, shall we say, the integrity of Horizon as in customers? Certainly, I think myself and everybody, you know, the kind of, you're still using that system, you know, after obviously the inquiry. So is that evident in citizens' advice? Is it never been raised or?
I think there is, particularly in the context of the last couple of years, there's surprise that it's still operating, and I think people are quite taken aback by that. They don't always know, but they are quite taken aback by that. But we haven't seen a significant drop-off in trust in local post offices and postmasters. So that seems to be the upshot of this, that we haven't seen people saying, I'm going to sort of stop using branches or stop using branches for services that I think are sort of at risk, or there hasn't been that big drop-off in consumer trust, which is really interesting, and a kind of lot of support for local postmasters and the institution generally. So yeah, on the one hand, there people are quite surprised that it's still operating and sort of often not aware of that and unclear about the consequences if it is. But we haven't seen the kind of drop-off in trust in the institution, or certainly in the kind of people's trust in their local post office that we might have sort of questioned about whether there would be, given the sort of news context.
Well, that's very good. That's very good to hear. Right, thank you. Right, so I think we'll go out to the floor now. So we've got Wendy and David have got mics. Anybody just stick your hand up, raise your hand, and ask your question. Thank you. I think we've got David there.
Yeah, David.
Just stand up, please. Thank you.
David, North East region. My questions for Ross. I ask every year. The banking facilities at post office counters is still a massive secret to the public. And I find when the local radio stations phone me and I talk about the facilities, people still come in and say, I didn't know we could do that. Why is it that Post Office and Citizens Advice, NFSP, and whoever else, and the media are not coming back with a resolution to say we offer these facilities? And another question, can I have a counting machine as soon as I've got one available? Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you, David. Ross.
Look, you're spot on. It is our best kept secret, frankly. So we have just not had the money, we've not spent the money on marketing. We have not made people aware enough of what we do, and we are in the process of changing that. So there's a lot of work at the moment going into our plans for the rest of this year to really shout about what we are doing in branch, and a key part of that is we are doing cash and banking, and that you can come in and you can do these services. That is partly about telling people when they're not in the post office, is also about helping you tell that story when they're in your branch as well, and providing you materials and vinyls and things that make it really clear this is what you can do there. So we absolutely need to get better. Our plan this year is we will do a lot more of that. The nice thing about 2 weeks ago when we announced BF4, it gave us an opportunity to get out and talk a lot more about what we were doing. We were very fortunate that the Treasury Select Committee published a report about cash acceptance on the same day, and so it ended up being quite a big day for cash. And actually, we knew the number of people who were called to say, come and talk about what you're doing. What we're trying to do is make sure that every time the media talk about cash, they talk about post office. We're not there yet, but that's one of our aims this year is if there's an article about cash, they're talking about what we do in branch. And so you're quite right to keep asking me, because we have got to get that message out. It's a big part of our plan this year is to shout much, much more loudly about what we do. Yeah, I mean, I've been out in the media, a number of my colleagues will be out in the media doing that, but it's not just about the interviews, it's getting into the papers, it's getting onto the online sites, it's talking about some of the stories that you play in the roles of the community. So there's lots of different ways we can do it, as well as media, advertising that we want to try and do a lot more of this year. So it's a big part of our plan is to really do a lot more. I agree with you, we have not done enough to shout about what we're doing.
Right, thank you. We've got Jim.
Thanks, Tim. Good morning. Morning, panel. Good morning, colleagues. Jim, Northern Ireland Region. A question on the banking, primarily for Ross. You spent 2 years negotiating which is a 5-year deal, which is a bit longer than the previous deals, which is excellent, and it's based on cash and higher remuneration. That's all good. During that 2 years, there's just 2 points to make here. During the 2 years, was it not the opportunity to extend the services and introduce products and talk to the banks about those extra services rather than just cash? That's the first part. And on this 5-year deal, is it going to be index linked to CPI or whatever? Is it fixed REM for the 5 years? That's the 2 points.
Good questions. So on the second one, the announcements around remuneration will start in 2 weeks' time at the town hall. So you will start hearing more around the plans for this year, but more importantly, over the next 5 years, how that will play out. On the products, so we had lots of conversations with the banks, and we did start exploring what else we could put into this deal. It became a very difficult set of negotiations, bluntly. We have put our price up quite a bit to be able to deliver all the things I've talked about. It was a longer term commitment than the banks really wanted to go for. We pushed really, really hard. What it meant was we had to keep it focused on the core of what we were doing. So I know a number of colleagues have come up and said, we really would like X, Y, and Z more. I completely agree. Where we're at now is we're now starting much more strategic conversations with the banks, which I think will lead into some of those other product areas. before we had this deal in place and before that longer term horizon was there, it was very hard to have those conversations, but it really has changed. Even the last 2 months, the conversations that Nigel and Neil are having at chair and chief exec level, and then down into the workshops we're now starting to do with banks to say, well, actually, we're going to be your partners now for the next 5 years plus. Many of our branches could do far, far more than they do today. Why don't we start talking about what that could be? So my aim is through this summer, as we're starting to workshop some of those ideas, start to understand areas we could build out on top of cash into the banking space. So I don't have an answer for you today. It was, in the end, the right thing to do to go and focus on maximising our role in cash under BF4. It's given us that platform now to go and do more afterwards. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Jim and Ross. Just before we move on, question for Paul, really. Is there anything technology-wise that could be provided, probably on a new Horizon platform, that could assist in this provision of new products and services on behalf of the banks?
So I think in the current platform, it's incredibly limited to do that, which is why we're not really focused on doing it. We're focusing on changing to a new, sorry for the tech spiel, but what we call a composable technology platform. And what that really means is that we end up with a core foundation and set of services that deliver the information that you need at branch, but you can build other services around it, and even buy services if you choose to. So I think as we move forward, what we'll actually end up seeing is we'll see complementary services that might actually come from the banks themselves that plug directly into our new platform, so that we can offer far more value from a service perspective as we go forward, and it will build out that way. So very much a strategic way of looking at how we deal with technology going forward.
Right, thank you, Paul. Next question, have we?
It's a question.
Alan,
a question for Paul. Alan Knight, South East Region, Kent. Your discussion on the Horizon system, as postmasters, we are still experiencing discrepancies, losses, blue screens. It's really getting some form of assurances from yourself and maybe the board of POL, because it's been rumoured that there's a fine window that we're looking at, that once POL have decided that Horizon is functional, that discrepancies could then be handed back to the postmasters, which obviously will take us back to where we were with the Horizon scandal. We need some assurances that these losses, which we incur, you know, I had one the other month where customers withdrawing £400, we give him the £400, we give him the withdrawal slip, his phone pings, he says, you've just deposited £400. We hadn't deposited £400. Mm-hmm. We gave him his £400. End of the day, we're £800 down. What assurances can we get from yourself and the board of POL that these investigations will continue? Because obviously we put it into first tier, second tier. That responsibility is not down to the postmaster. We have to be assured that we're not going to be responsible for these losses.
So I think at the moment on the Horizon platform as it stands now, when issues like that occur, absolutely they have to be investigated, and we'll continue to do that without question. So it has to happen. I mean, I think they're a lot less than they were, but they still occur from time to time. So it's our responsibility as the owners of the platform, albeit, you know, it's out to Fujitsu to manage, but it's our responsibility to make sure that we investigate all of these things. So we will absolutely continue to do that. As we move forward, Horizon will become a thing of the past, and I've said it a few times today, but it will not be there going forward in any way, shape or form. It will be a system that is fully auditable, will be completely transparent, and even having said that, when there are discrepancies, there is still recourse for us to investigate those services and those discrepancies, because we need to ensure that the transactions are accurate and validated. So yeah, you've got absolutely my commitment that we'll continue to do that regardless of which platform.
Right, thank you, Paul.
Hi, it's Tim Allen again, I'm afraid. Yeah, Paul, just hammering on at you still a bit here. You know, Fujitsu is a failed, obsolete, outsourced model that is a decade or more overdue for replacement. NBIT is a failed, in-source model. What does a successful model look like? And how many years will it be before we do see it, best and worst case? I understand the language when you say composable technology platform is the future, but I mean, I don't think there's anyone in that room that really does understand what you're saying.
Okay, yeah, so let's cover the composable, what it is first. So where we're aiming to get to is a platform that is in many cases off the shelf, so commercial software, and it's composed, it will be in the cloud. So, you know, I'm sure you guys have heard that term before. It'll be a platform that is flexible, and critically, the most important part is it's standards-based. And that's a really important part, because Horizon does not conform to an open standard, which is why there are so many problems in trying to interface with it, get information from it, and then try to reconcile issues when they occur. So that ethos of the way that it was built was back in the late 90s, going into early 2000s. You do not build platforms like that anymore. So as we move forward, we will absolutely not commit to build things that already exist and are already proven technologies that are out there in the market. It doesn't make a financial sense for us to invest loads of money just to get to where everybody else is. So where it's core components, we will take them off the shelf. Where they are things that are bespoke to the post office, we will either build them in-house, or we will look to our partners or potentially suppliers that are out there to enhance it. Again, the standards point is really important here, because once you get to standards, you can pretty much plug anything else in that you wish that conforms to the same standard, which makes your system composable, so you can add and remove at will effectively. So that's the idea of where we go forward. And this is a well-trodden path. This isn't something that, you know, Paul woke up last Friday and thought of it and we're doing it. This is something that's been in the industry for 20 plus years in technology, and it's the way that it's done. I think in terms of NBIT and various other programs, I wasn't around at those times when they were decided upon, but had I been, then to in-source and do what was effectively outsourced before was doomed to failure from day one, because it requires an awful lot of skill and resources, and we obviously attempted to do that. Not to say that everything that went on in NBIT was a failure. There are very good components that are part of what was delivered under NBIT, and we are currently using them, and it's the things that have actually, to some degree, stabilized the Horizon platform, and we'll continue to nurture those things whilst we go through the process of looking at a new platform. In terms of timescales, the first and foremost, obviously, we want to exit Fujitsu. That is a really key part of what we need to do going forward. And we are looking to do that within really the next 2 to 3 years at the latest. In parallel, as we go through that, we'll be looking at bringing in suppliers to be able to provide a new platform for us. We're already, if you've probably seen in the news already, we're already out to market doing that activity as we speak. Where we want to get to at the moment is between 5 and 7 years to be completely complete with the new platform. You guys have it on every counter with all the new hardware that goes with that. What we hope to do is reduce that even further, but we're in the very early throes of going out to market at the moment and assessing various different platforms, and so it does take a little bit of time, and not to forget that we do have a quite lengthy public procurement process that we are obliged to go through. It's a legal requirement for us, and that can be a little bit lengthy. I say this quite a lot. Technologically, this isn't actually that difficult, and it's easy for me to say, I know, but it really isn't. Really where we need to get to is it's the way that we operate as a business, the standards that we use, and that will take a little bit of time, and Postmasters will be involved every step of the way as we do that. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Paul. Just before we move on, is it Post Office Limited's intention for the new Horizon, we'll call it NBIT, for it to be intuitive? And what I mean by that is if you look at websites such as comparethemarket.com, you know, a 90-odd-year-old can go on there and get the home insurance, car insurance, and go through all the drop-down menus, and when they're finished, they've got the right product. And they've probably felt a great sense of achievement in doing so. If you look at a Horizon system now, it's very, you know, it's not very logical, it's not very, it's functional, it functions, but it's not intuitive. And I just think that Post Office is probably missing a little bit of a trick there. And could you consider, you know, it's a science, it's human-computer interaction science in the development of Horizon's replacement.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is exactly where we're trying to get to. So I've spoken to a number of people, particularly about devices in post offices on counters and so on. And I was asked a question a while ago, you know, what is the strategy for the devices and the system? I think the thing to bear in mind is that the way that Horizon is at the moment is it's an all-in-one service. So the counter hardware is an extension of what goes on the core. So in our central system, that governs what you see in front of you every day. You can't alter it, you can't change it, it's incredibly inflexible, and the journeys that are within it are fixed. As we move forward, that will change very much. So from a user experience perspective, my view as we go forward and what we're trying to get to is to a point where far more of what we deliver is delivered in an app-centric world. So you can choose to download it and put it on a tablet if you wanted to, put it on a phone if you wanted to, or have a piece of hardware that we supply. But the flexibility is really important, and more importantly, how you see and how you use the system going forward will be tunable by you. And not governed by the way that a process works in the core. And that's really, really key as we go forward. Adding new service and the intuitive nature of what we might want to do going forward, the way that things are built now, there is in the core of the system that we're looking at is what we call an event bus. That's the technical term for it. But what it essentially does is it allows you to look at the things that are going on in your transactional world and trigger an event. So if you decided that you wanted to have pop-ups on a screen or a message sent, or you wanted to be informed in some way of things that are going on, you will have the ability to do that ad hoc, and that's tunable by us or by you directly. So that will make a lot more sense. Then there's the other interface side of this, which is what you see on a website, what you see in an app, which is, I think we can probably all agree, very poor at the moment. And we'll drive that more intuitive journey for you to be able to select things and be able to choose the various products and services that you need using apps or web-driven interfaces, both at the postmaster level or at a consumer level as well. So there's a long way to go with the journey, but as I say, the foundation is the important part, which is where we are at the moment. So building flexibility is absolutely critical to making it successful as we go forward.
Thank you, Paul. Next question, I think. Yep.
Pete Tyson from North Thames and East. And I've got a couple of questions. One question is looking back at NBIT, so it leads on very nicely. We've clearly scrapped that as a programme now, so I'd just like a really clear figure on how much did we spend on that scrapped project. And we mentioned yesterday that there were some lessons learned, so just like a bit of clarity around what exactly those lessons were and how they're going to be used going forward. And then my next question is about looking forward. So yesterday we heard about 5 key pillars with 17 sub-categories and then 100 different projects, coupled with £300 million of investment. Now, looking at how Post Office has operated in the past, that to me seems like a recipe for uncoordinated, inefficient behaviours. So I want some really concrete reassurances just around project management, about how you're going to be approaching those 100 projects in a way where everything links up together and is going to be deliverable with things that we can hold you to account for.
Okay, I think the first one around what was the total cost of NBIT, I don't know the answer to that one, so I'll have to take that away, and I'll come back to you on that. But there's...
Who would know? Because
I'm probably part of the PMO team that I think that ran the project will have the final figures on what that was.
Can we get someone to come back to us with that figure so that we're informed about
Yep.
what's happened with that investment?
Yeah, absolutely, we can. Yeah. In terms of lessons learned with MBIT, a huge amount of lessons learned, I think. I think the way things were managed, the various different skill sets that we had at the time, which, as you probably all know, a lot of which were third-party contractors and consultancy companies that did a great deal of that work. So the in-house knowledge was limited, and we've changed that going forward now. So the knowledge is with permanent people that are working within the post office. So we own the outcome effectively. In terms of the pillars, so not every exec has a transformation pillar. I do. So I own the transform technology and data pillar. But in terms of the projects that sit underneath it, they may seem quite daunting, but they all roll up to one larger project, which we see from a technology perspective in FTP, and it's very well planned out, very well marked, and it's very well resourced to be able to deliver that. And I think from a management perspective, we have very, very clear guidelines, which we can again share with you as to what we're doing and when we're doing it. So I have a lot of confidence that what we are trying to do is entirely achievable. It does seem like a lot of work, and it is a lot of work, but it is structured in a way that we can deliver it. So year one, as you know, I'm sure they spoke about it yesterday, is about the foundation. So getting the underlying foundational technology right is critical to the success of the bits that sit on the top. And I think when we look at the lessons that we learned as we did NBIT, trying to bring something as complicated as Horizon in-house to rebuild, and it wasn't a rebuild and modernize, it was a rebuild as is one of the big fundamental mistakes that we made. It should never have been that way. To rebuild Horizon internally, you rebuild the problems, and that's not what we want to do. We have to eradicate the problems and have a foundation to be able to move on from. So absolutely, we can share with you the progress, and I think there is actually a plan for us to do that with you guys as we go forward as to what we're doing. Again, don't underestimate the amount of work to do, but it's structured in a way that is achievable and staffed to be able to do that.
Right, thank you. Just before we move on, just as a matter of interest for Neil and Ross, how involved do both of you get in the actual development of the product journey on Horizon? Do you actually get involved and say, well, that's just not sort of acceptable, it's too slow, it's too clunky, and will you do in future? So that, you know, when postmasters are delivering these products and services to the customers, you know, you've had input, and yourselves and your departments have had input, so that, you know, yeah.
So yeah, I think we do get involved. We heard a lot from Mitch over the last morning and yesterday, and from Candice, I hope, about the improvements that we are working on with postmasters to improve the journeys for example, for the sales process, and even for the PUDO process. So it's ongoing, it's iterative, it's something I do believe is critical and very important that I get involved in and that my team get involved in with you all. And I'm also a big believer in that we should get something very good, approved, but never expect that we can't continue to improve it. So I think there always will be an iterative process where we look at changes. And in fact, even if we look at additional services or changes in the way a carrier may sell or operate their product, it can and it will require changes. And certainly one carrier versus another will have a slightly different process. We look to harmonize that as much as we can, and we can do a better job of that. But essentially, it's a very important part of the whole product ownership and management, which I take a lot of time with my team looking at. Ross?
Yes, very, very similar. And I guess just to add, I mean, while our product teams are clearly intimately involved in that. To be honest, the best feedback in the last few years has been when you have been providing feedback on that through testing, because actually it's all well and good us working through that, but you're the ones using it every day. So actually that's where I think we found the best feedback in enhancing or improving or just getting it quite right has been, well, actually, you know, what you produced here doesn't quite work. It needs much. That's where we've, I think, really seen a lot more value in the last few years than maybe we were before that.
Right, thank you. Next question is one David's.
Hi, yes, Stuart Reddish.
Stuart.
It's for Ross, actually, regarding, let's bring it back to banking. Two, and everybody has the same experience, banking limits.
Yep.
Can you talk us through what the next steps of that is, obviously, in terms of what you can do? And the second one is about counterfeit notes, which is a bugbear of most people. You know, when you work in a bank and you take a counterfeit note, the bank staff don't actually get charged for that. We as individual postmasters, if we take counterfeit notes, we have been told different stories. Some people tell us that we do get charged for it, so we don't actually take Scottish notes in our post office. Can you talk us through whether or not that is the case and whether or not we can actually return those and knowingly we can accept them, and if we take counterfeit notes we won't get charged back? And the banking limits in particular, it's so frustrating when we take the money and then we're asked the customers always, have you banked before? Have you got the limits?
Yep.
Yes, I have. And then we count the money and then we have to give them the money
Yep.
back. Can you talk us through that, please?
Yep, no, absolutely. So let me try and answer the second one first. So my understanding is that if you're capturing fraudulent notes and you're passing it back, that we're taking that loss back at the cash centre. I will say an exception. If it's monopoly money, right, different story. But some of these counterfeits are really good, right? So my understanding is that is the case. I suspect if there's lots and lots coming through in one branch, you'll get some questions back from supply chain. But one of the reasons we've got to get these note counters out to you is we've got to give you the devices to be able to try and pick up some of these fraudulent notes, because those Scottish ones, as an example, the Scottish £20 notes, they're really good. I mean, sorry, I can't hear you.
We are lucky enough to have a counter machine
Yep.
in our main office,
Yep.
but the sub-officers and the counter office don't have the machines.
Yep.
So if they take the counterfeit, we capture them, but we don't capture every single one of them. So we've stopped. So you're actually categorically saying we can take them as long as they're not monopoly money, then we won't be charged back those.
That is my understanding. I will go and confirm it with the supply chain team. But my understanding is we are taking that loss back at the cash centre.
Okay. And then the banking limits?
Yep, so on banking limits, so I think last year we spoke quite a bit about this as well, so I won't cover all the history. I think you all know the challenges that the FCA and the National Crime Agency have been placing on the banks around trying to cut down around money laundering. There was a big article in the Daily Mail last weekend about the challenges around cash-based money laundering. So these limits have come in to try and address that. My view is they're a really, really blunt instrument and they don't work. You know, the bad guys are just opening multiple accounts and going around it, and what we're ending up with is legitimate customers getting frustrated because they can't bank, and in particular, you're counting the cash, you're then failing to do the deposit, you're having to count the cash back out again, you're almost doing it twice, right? So one of the things in Framework 4 is we said to the banks, we're going to charge you the same whether it's a success or failed transaction. And so one of the changes we'll be making to REM next year will be, it doesn't make any difference if it's failed or not, because we counted the money. You know, the fact that you, bank, have said no to it is really, you know, you need to set your limits right. You need to tell your customers what the right limit is. So that will be a positive change, I hope, going forward. It doesn't take away from the frustration the customer's going to give you. So I get that bit. So where we're at is we've got the FCA continuing to put pressure on the banks. We've got business customers having quite a varied experience. Some banks are quite good, like Barclays, quite good at setting quite variable limits for businesses, but personal customers are tending to get a blanket 10k a year limit, which really isn't that much. I interestingly started some further conversations last week with some of the banks who would like to explore ways that we could start doing other things that might allow us to change those limits. So, for example, could you do a further ID check that would allow that limit to be raised to a higher number? So my hope is this summer we will start getting into some other conversations about trying to address some of that. Monzo's limits are really low right now. They're about to go through a change on their personal customers. They did that, their business customer changes back in January. That's made a really big difference to volume. So I'm starting to see some changes to it, but it is all a balance, because the challenge is we are absolutely being targeted by organised crime as a major route now for deposits in the country, and so we need to make sure that the controls are right. My view is the banks need to do a lot more at their end. They're supposed to know their customers. They should know whether someone dropping 20 grand into their account is suspicious or not, because they should be able to see in their transaction history, well, you know, they don't usually do that. or this business is, you know, putting a lot of money in this year. They've never done that before. Why? And investigating. So my view is it really should be much more on the back office bank controls, where they will have much, much more information and much less on, frankly, quite blunt instruments at the front end. The challenge the banks have is the FCA has been really quite difficult about the whole thing, and have left these limits as they are. So the next exercise really is, what things could we do that would give banks comfort to then have higher limits, or either on all or some customers, and we'll be working through some of those this summer. But yeah, I mean, Barclays last week raised it with me that they would like to explore that further, because they are finally starting to hear some of the pain from their customers, that they are also getting frustrated. I take Barclays as an example. The limits they've set for their customers in our branches is the same as their branches. So they are their customers are experiencing it across every channel. And I think now recognising actually it's not quite working.
Right, thank you. Beth, talking about counterfeit notes, fraud, scams, just how big a problem is it in society? Is it getting worse, better? Could the post office and banks, etc., do more?
Well, it's certainly, I mean, it's not something that our team sort of works directly on, but our frontline service run a kind of scams awareness week every year. It's certainly both sort of becoming more complicated, and I think certainly people are much more kind of aware and fearful of them, of those kind of issues. But it's not something that the kind of postal policy team has looked at directly, but certainly our local offices will each run a kind of scams awareness month every year, and they will look to local partners, so potentially local post offices and others, to kind of talk to find out what the sort of sense of in the community of the key scams people are encountering, and how they can sort of raise that message and provide advice more effectively on the front line.
Right, thank you. We've got Callum now.
Yeah, sorry, Ross. I obviously just want to sort of kind of pick up on money laundering. Obviously, we've had conversations just over the last week, sort of in relation to this. There are people in this room who received a knock on the door from the National Crime Agency 4 years ago. Their homes were searched. Their businesses, their post offices were searched. The police went into their private safes, took cash that has never been returned to them. That was 4 years ago. We're aware that there's 5 of our colleagues who have been charged by the police in relation to money laundering. Now, for 4 years, the business has been aware. For 4 years, I and the NFSP have been pushing the Post Office to do more to protect these colleagues, so that we are not seen as a weak link in relation to money laundering, but very much at the forefront of the fight against criminal activity, using our businesses and placing us and our staff in a position of harm in relation to a very, very serious crime. It appears on our level, and as I've spoken to colleagues over the weekend, that actually we are vulnerable, we are exposed. That's £50 for the NFSP Benevolent Fund. So what more can you sort of do? One of the things that we've actually sort of put forward is a recommendation sort of that on Horizon there is a button that for a suspicious specific activity to report, rather than us having to do a manual sort of process. As everyone here knows, we do not know the name on the card because it's on the other side of the counter, but that information could be collated, answering a couple of questions, that could dramatically increase the number of SARs that we do, and therefore, because that is seen as a weak aspect by the FCA, by the risk assessments are done by the Home Office, etc. So really, what can you tell these individuals who are on the front line and are actually, it's them who are having to knock on the door. No offence, nobody from Post Office and nobody from the banks, in essence, are having it. It's these people here. What are you doing? What is the business doing? What is the Post Office financial crime team doing to actually protect these individuals?
Thanks, Callum. And you obviously dropped me a note on Friday, so I will come back to you on that. I think on your suggestion around SARS, I think it's a really good one. So it is I think, clunky process right now. I think when you do see something suspicious, having to pick up the phone to then do that in a busy environment, it doesn't feel right. And equally, you don't have all the information. So useful as it might mean we then have to phone you and ask you more questions. That isn't slick. So it is something, we're looking at whether we can do something in Horizon. It's certainly going into the requirements for any replacement service, so that can be far better. And that I think will help. One of the challenges with SARS, and we have to raise them when we see suspicious activity, is then piecing together the story that goes around it, because you might then raise a number of SARS, we might get a number of other ones we can pull together. It goes back to the banks for them to work through. One of the things I know a number of you have raised with me before is I raise a SAR and then I hear nothing back. And so you've done your bit, but actually we're not acknowledging, we're not doing enough to give it. Now, I can't always necessarily give you much back on certain things, but there's more we could do to, I think, recognise that you have done something and to feed back. And even if it's feeding back a number of months later after an investigation has taken place and then giving you some feedback, I think that would be really helpful, because sometimes I think you just probably feel like you're throwing stuff into the wind, and is it really helping? So Callum's raised a number of those points with me, and I will take them away to look at what more we can try and do around that. I think more generally, and it comes back to some of the automation points earlier, what I'm really keen is that we are providing you the tools to provide a cash service in branch that gives you more comfort. And we talked about fraudulent notes earlier. I think we have to be providing you the tools to try and identify those at the counter. So it doesn't just help speeding up, but actually you're identifying fraudulent notes as an example. We know criminals often will use fraudulent notes as part of their deposits. If you've got an ability to identify them, that helps. But also, if they know that Post Office has the tools at the front line to identify this kind of thing, it will help deter. And so really, as we start to provide more support to you in how you're providing those cash services, I think it will change the perception of what we're providing in branch. And the more I think we can come across as bank-like, then the more I think we'll be able to aid with that. So I don't think there's any silver bullet. We can make much longer conversation on this at some point, but I think lots of things like that will help in, first of all, people looking at us and saying, actually, no, this is a bank-grade service we're providing, but also giving you a bit more comfort in providing these cash services.
Who's next? Stand up, Richard.
Yeah, so Richard Trinder from the North East. 2 quick questions, one for Neil and one for Ross. Neil, up to 1 kilo large letter, when will we be able to offer that over the counter so that we can compete with the online business?
I'd have to come back to you on that, Richard. I'm not really sure that I know the detail behind that, but I think that if we also look at some of the additional products that have been rolled out by Every in the next couple of months, we've got an Every postable product, which I think we're looking at. I think it's within 2 months.
Fantastic.
But I'll have to confirm.
That's really good news, because that will compete with Royal Mail, which is good. Ross, hi.
Hello.
Lloyds have taken away the ability for customers to pay in cheques at branches. How soon do you think the other banks may follow suit? And is there anything that we can do as an organisation and as a body of postmasters to prevent it happening or to slow it down? Thank you.
You're absolutely right. So I mentioned earlier we had a very difficult set of negotiations with the banks. And one of the repercussions of that is that Lloyds have decided that from January they will not continue using our cheque service for their brands. So that's Lloyds, Halifax, Bank of Scotland. I should say it is a small amount of our business, but I accept for those customers it's frustrating. I think it probably will make up 0.25% of the revenue, right? But it's got a much bigger impact than that. The good news is no other bank has followed. Everyone else has signed up for our check service, so no one else is leaving. And they are locked in for the 5 years. So I'm not expecting others to follow suit. I spoke to quite a few other banks, I'll be honest. Quite a few of them were a bit surprised by Lloyd's decision and intend to continue working with us on checks. One of the things we will work through now is what is the alternative now for those customers? Because they're still going to come into our branch and there may be an opportunity for us to say, well, look, you can't use the check service you would do before, but we can still send it for you. And can we provide you, for example, with a way of doing that easily? You'd have to charge a customer like it would be a mails transaction. But if we provide you the details to do it, that might be an alternative. And obviously you would obviously earn on that transaction as well. So the team were just looking at how we might find an alternative supporting those customers. Next month or two, we should have a view on it, and then obviously we'll work on communicating that before we get to the end of the year. So look, frustrating, not least they didn't tell us in advance. We learned in the press, which I was not impressed by. It's a repercussion of we push really hard with our pricing, and they've decided actually they wanted to try and save some money. They're not going to save very much, but they've come out, but everyone else is staying in.
Yeah.
We're in my London region. On Horizon, I got 3 questions like different. One is for Horizon. Today on my first session, I got some review from my colleagues, and they're saying, is there any buttons you can put it on? Like, you know, in a Christmas time, you put it on first class, second class, Christmas tab. Same sort of button, you can put it down any miscollection of issue or any other issue related to any product. You can just click that button and notify to the post office that this branch is having issue, because they are very busy on their counters to be report NBSE or go on branch out of the counter. So is there any possibility at the moment, current system, in future you have might be a reporting system, but now can you do it at the moment, make it easy?
So I don't think it can be done at the moment, but I will go back and check to see whether or not it's on a future roadmap plan to deliver anything. It may be, so I'll come back and check with you on there. As with all things on Horizon, it's always ridiculously complicated and long-winded to do these things, which is why it takes such a long time, or often you don't get it. New World, obviously, not a problem, but yeah, let me go away and I'll come back to you and let you know if it's possible.
Thank you. For banking, we know there's so many banks on the high street, and now we are supporting them for bankings. Can we use that platform to just referral their people for mortgages, loans, or credit card or anything? Because post office own brand not working good, but can we put it on referral, like from put a button, put anyone's interested in Lloyd's or they are coming for their mortgage review, we can put it on, click that information, post office makes some money, and the postmaster makes some money as well. Is it something possible?
So we have a small number of our own financial products that we predominantly serve online. I know loans savings we do some of in branch. We have tested in the past doing some of those in branch. They don't always translate very well because they're quite long transactions, bluntly. And if you're a busy branch, you haven't got the time to be doing a long form fill or something at the counter. So I'm always happy to look at how we can explore that. We're very close to finalising a new arrangement on loans, which we'll be announcing next month, which will be, you know, us coming back into that market, which I think will be good. As we look forward, we need to look at how we serve customers for financial services. So at the moment, we're doing that predominantly online. Talked earlier about financial and digital inclusion. There's definitely something to look at about those who are not comfortable going online. Is there a role that we can play in branch to help them? Is there a side-by-side service we could perform? We need to look at how we'd commercialise that, but it's one aspect we're looking at about how we might be able to build out more in-branch activity in that space. But it's not easy, but it's something we're just considering at the moment.
Okay, and from yesterday when the post office talked about, they are talking about 5 years plan and informing they won't use post office postmaster forums. I just want to ask one question. Where is NFSP stand in this 5 years plan? So what post office thinking to involvement on all their projects from NFSP? Because
Sorry,
at the
you'll have to be
moment,
clear on the question.
what's happening in post office showing that in their 5-year plans, they are using different cluster groups or peers group for postmasters. But are they going to use NFSP on each and every stage and inform NFSP, or just once a year post office come and say, okay, this is our plans and we are doing like that, or they want to involve NFSP on every stage of the organization planning and things?
All right, thank you.
Shall I take that?
Yeah.
So I think you're right. There's lots and lots of forums that we're doing. I think the key thing is if there is a forum that we need to come to, like NFSP, to be able to inform them, keep them updated, happy to do that, no problem at all. What I wouldn't want to do is stifle our ability to move at pace and hold up that process. So I think we can take that question internally and take a look at how we can keep the right people involved at the right time. Very early stages at the moment, so we can certainly adjust if we need to.
Right, thank you. We've got a gentleman over here somewhere. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, myself Balwant Patel from Church Road Post Office, London. My question is related to NBIT version 2. We already spent some amount of millions of money on NBIT. We don't know, what's going to happen. And my concern is again on the NBIT version 2. What is the projected cost for that? Where this money is going to come from? And according to our project plan, when is the first MVP is going to come? So when we are expecting the first MVP?
Okay, so projected costs at the moment, we can't tell you because we haven't even started the process, but there's estimations that have been put forward that have meant for the first year of the plan, we've got budget to cover that. So I think yesterday they would have gone through the various budget lines that sit with that. In terms of MVP, lots of people look at minimum viable product. We're looking at minimum value product, which is a very different notion. We want to deliver something of value, and that's the foundational point. So to be honest, this year, you won't see a great deal of new stuff arrive because a lot of it will be in the foundation, and a lot of it is procurement process. But in the coming years, you'll be able to see that. And we'll relay that update as we move forward. There's quite a lot of information that's involved that we haven't yet gone through. As I say, we're at the very early stages of working through that. But it'll all become knowledge that we'll pass on to everyone here so you can see what the progress is.
Jim Gordon, South West. Question for you, Ross. It's very good that we're increasing our cash deposits and so on. And we're now getting the kit to improve that transaction time to protect our staff. The less time they're processing, the less vulnerable they are. Is there any more money in the budget to actually act as a deterrent, if you like, because we're increasingly becoming a target. If there's more cash in branch, which there is, then we need some form of deterrence to protect ourselves and our staff.
Yeah, good question. So let me take it away to talk with our security team. So that they do a lot of assessments around the amount of cash we're seeing in each branch, and in particular, if they've got concerns that that branch might be at risk, they do work to put in some deterrence. So, for example, a number of branches do have fogging machines. I know either you may have in some cases, but also we have CCTV in some branches, which acts both as a deterrent and obviously an ability to track what's going on. Let me take that away as what more we're doing. I'm not sure I can give you a clear answer on that today. But I think it's a valuable point. As we are doing more and more cash, we need to make sure we're continuing to set our branches up suitably to do that. So I can't give you a clear answer on that today, but I'll take it away. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Who's next?
Yeah, Sergeant Hussain, South East Region. My question's on banking hub. It's great that we're getting banking hubs, but I don't see how that helps every sub-postmaster. So you put a banking hub in a town, and the surrounding sub-post offices are going to lose out on that. And that's a big fear I have, that although banks are closing, but it's not going to benefit the whole network. Is there something you can do to help the surrounding post offices plus the business?
So I think a few things just to talk about around hubs at the moment. So I I think we've talked a bit about this before. So we're obviously not putting the hubs out there. So the banks are choosing through cash access to put hubs into a number of these communities. We have the contract then to run those. And at the moment, we're running all of those. I should say, you know, that the banks are looking for other ways to run hubs. So we may see in the future other hubs run by the people. Right now, they're all run by us. What we then do is advertise those to the 5 nearest postmasters when they are announced. And ideally, we'd like a local postmaster to run it. And I think over 90% of hubs that are being appointed right now are going to a local postmaster. What we're seeing is if there's a post office very close to a hub, we do see some transactions moving. And in that case, we are paying the difference to that postmaster if they're not the one running that local one, because our view is, look, we didn't, but equally you didn't know, put that hub there, and we're trying to do something to help where it's very close. But what we see if we look at a community as a whole, if I add up all the transactions I'm seeing across that community and the hub before and after, we are seeing quite a significant increase in the total amount of transactions we're doing. So we're gaining market share significantly. And our view is there's a lot of customers who are currently not using the post office for cash. And that might come back to our problem earlier, not enough people know about it, but lots of people who are going out of town, going to alternatives, doing something else. But once the hub opens, they then start using that. And so overall, what we're seeing with hubs is we are growing our share in cash. And I think a lot of that is coming from customers who we just were not serving beforehand. So at the moment, we continue to monitor this very closely because I'm very conscious, the last thing we're wanting is for that. I'm still keen that more of these hubs are co-located. For me, it makes little sense that cash access are opening independent sites when actually a local post office would be, in my view, a far better place to be locating some of these. But at the moment, that is their strategy. My view is if they're going to open these, let's make sure it's Postmaster running one rather than a competitor. But we'll continue to keep a good eye on it. And look, lots of you give me really useful feedback, so please keep doing it because we'll keep looking, we'll keep adjusting and trying to make this work as best as possible.
And one last question.
Hi, Ewan Shaw, Scotland region. Just on the back of what Callum was saying and the increase in banking limits, do you feel sub-postmasters are sufficiently protected through, we've got limited anti-money laundering training, you get 10 questions. Do you feel we are supported? We don't have the MI that the banks have to do with businesses. We don't know if a business has 10 outlets, 1 outlet, and yet, the sub-postmaster is the one that, as Callum said, is potentially going to get, charged and held to account. Not post office, not the banks, so it all falls back. But it's just, Ross, do you feel we are sufficiently protected?
So can I just be clear? You absolutely trained and asked, obviously, to ask some questions about what's happening there. But the accountability around this is with the banks. So they are the ones that know their customer. They are the ones on the hook around money laundering, and it's them who will get fined, and many of them have got fined hundreds of millions over the last few years for failing to have the right controls in place. So it is with the banks. What we must make sure is that we're providing you the training, and if you don't feel that is sufficient, and Callum's written to me about that topic, and I will come back to him, we need to do more to support you on that. But it is the banks who are on the hook to make sure that, at the end of the day, you're taking a customer's request, you're going off to the bank in the transaction, say, can I accept this, yes or no? And the bank comes back and either accepts or rejects that. It is their controls. We are part of that controlled environment, but we are only one part of it. They are the ones that are on the hook. They're the ones that are getting fined when it all goes wrong, and hence those limits have been placed by the banks as part of this. Sorry.
We're a small part of that. But we've had colleagues and as Steve mentioned, houses, raided, businesses raided, checked, funds being taken from them. Does the post office then support these postmasters? I mean, we can only do so much as a business. We can do yourself. Sorry. No, it's just, my question really is, do you feel that sub-postmasters are sufficiently protected at this moment in time?
It's a good question. I think I need to think about it a bit harder. I think I've had some very useful feedback in the last 3 or 4 days around those examples, and apologies I'm not familiar with that example. And you know, it's clear to me the feedback I'm getting is you don't feel that way. So I think we need to look at this more and make sure that we are providing you the support you need. And I will commit to take that away and look at that.
Right, thank you everyone. I'm going to leave the last word with Beth. She's sat here, and it can't have been very, very easy coming into somewhere where you don't particularly know anybody, and a lot of what's been discussed is probably over your head. But I'm just going to ask, do you think the business is moving in the right direction to meet the needs and wants of society and communities and customers?
I think there's a huge amount of potential. The value of being so recognised and so trusted is often overlooked a bit, but I think the fact that the Post Office has existed for as long as it has, that people still have high levels of trust in their local postmasters is really central. I think in terms of the future, there are some big questions that we feel that Post Office and government should be looking at. I suppose one of those is how can the Post Office best realise its potential as the kind of last, as sort of come out in a lot of comments here, one of the last remaining hubs for face-to-face help and support that many people are aware of and trust on their high streets. How do we ensure that that potential is realised in a time where resources are tight, you know, lots of things happening on the high street, that, you know, financial pressures are intense on many post offices and other institutions. So how do we ensure that we can better target that face-to-face support where it's needed? Is there a role for technology in that kind of easing that transition? And we also know that there's a wide group of customers still using post office services who are more capable of self-serving. That is, we're still seeing that kind of high volumes from across society, whether it's, obviously we're seeing a lot of shift now between letters and parcels, but for small businesses and for consumers, we're still seeing, you know, large majority using the post office regularly, at least once a month. So how we can ensure that the sort of potential is realised for that support for vulnerable consumers at a point that lots of their sort of channels for support and services have fallen away. And I suppose also looking at the kind of access criteria, do the access criteria capture what consumers most want to see from their services? So is it about sheer numbers of branches, or should we be looking a little bit more carefully at the sort of what is actually being offered? Are those branches full-time or part-time? Where are we seeing temporary closures? Are there things that aren't really captured under access criteria that consumers care about? One of the big ones is quality of service. Particularly if the post office is becoming much more of that stop for support, dealing with more vulnerable and complicated customers, having to provide more advice. How can we ensure that those high levels of trust that customers have continue by sort of ensuring that quality of service is guaranteed in some way across the network? So those are the kind of issues that we're looking at for the future. But I've taken a lot of way away from this conversation, particularly around the awareness of different services and whether there's more that we can do to test not just people's knowledge of, say, banking hubs, but the individual services that are provided at post offices, and whether there's more that we could do to support consumers in becoming aware of what is available to them.
Right, thank you. So I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank the panel members, and also thank you to yourselves for being very well behaved and respectful compared with the last session, but anyway. Right, so there will be a small buffet now in the back room. Could you all please be back by 1:15, when we'll have a second question time panel. That will be with the Minister Gareth Thomas, Nigel Railton, Chair of the Post Office, our very own Callum Greenow, and Graham Nuttall, who is an expert on ownership models. Thank you very much.